Welcome to Hoop City with Paul Sir. This is the deep dive. I'm so happy to be welcoming back Ben Golliver. Ben, it was great seeing you in your stomping grounds in Southern California a couple of weeks ago, and it's great to have you on the show again.
It's good to be back, and I'm surprised we didn't keep you down here. You know, sometimes people come to California and they never leave. I don't know if you got tempted like that.
We did. Yeah, I think you always do. You go, really? We're leaving this? And when we landed, it was more like, really? This is what we're coming back to? Because we came back to cold and snow. But hey, we all know home's where the heart is.
Oh, yeah.
And, at least we have to keep telling ourselves that. So before we go into the last weekend of the NBA, I would like to do a little bit on the end of March Madness with your Michigan Wolverines winning for the first time since 1989. Dominant performance, although you have to give UConn a lot of credit in the final game. And then UCLA winning their first women's championship ever, I guess, because the last time they won was in 1978 when it wasn't the NCAA championship. It was something totally different. So a huge victory for the Bruins. And I'd like to start with the Bruins because it's a team that from a watchability standpoint was a real easy team, not just to watch, but to like. I felt, whether it was from the enthusiasm of their really great coach, Corey Close, on the sideline, but their style of play, the type of players that they had, that was a great championship team, I thought, Ben.
Well, it was a very satisfying run. You know, I covered them at last year's March Madness, and I thought they were going to do it last year, and they actually got to the Final Four and just took a horrible loss. I mean, it was a complete blowout. They weren't competitive. They were shell-shocked. And it was one of those moments where you wonder how a team and a coach will respond when they've never done it, like you've described. I mean, Corey Close has been at it for a long time. Her players this year were like all seniors, pretty much all the key players. And they just did the classic, like, well, you get punched in the mouth, get yourself back up, and we're going to come back and do it again. This year, UConn wasn't as good as the previous year. They didn't actually get UConn, and they shot at a revenge because the bracket broke a little bit differently. But boy, did they take care of business. I really put a lot of it on Lauren Betts. As fun as they are to watch on offense, because they move the ball, they share the ball, and they involve her, which is always fun because, the entry pass, it's a lost art in a lot of basketball. And UCLA is not afraid to throw those entry passes. But I thought it was just her defensive presence that just shut everything down. She's not as mobile as like the NBA version of a Wembanyama or a Chet, or, these high level, bigs that just patrol the paint. But she was so big, so good at the defensive rebounding, and then so disciplined, play to play, doesn't take plays off, that South Carolina just couldn't figure out what to do. I mean, their offense was basically incompetent. They're barely scoring. And I'm not saying that to bash South Carolina. I'm just saying that is the kind of impact that a huge player who's great at blocking shots, great at rebounding, and great at stepping out and switching when necessary can have on a game. And so I thought they won the championship with defense. Of course, Jaquez had a major starring role with all of her energy. And, Kiki Rice is a great player. I mean, just go down the list. They have a lot of people who contributed, but it was a true team that stuck together after a very difficult loss the previous year. And, it was cool to see them get a lot of recognition here in LA. They actually had a moment at the Lakers game to celebrate them. And then the very next night, they had a moment at the Clippers game to celebrate them. And so they were the toast of the town here, bringing a championship home. And of course, Corey Close, we gave a lot of the credit to her mentor, John Wooden, which is always nice to see that lineage as well.
Well, it really is. And I thought the stories that came out talking about her experiences with Coach Wooden and her being able to be influenced by and mentored somewhat by Wooden, but certainly impacted by him. And it's really a shame that Wooden's era is so far in the past, Ben, because his coaching style, his philosophy, not just his success, not his gaudy record in the record books, but I think he is still to this day the beacon of coaching. At the ultimate height, because his thoroughness and his thoughtfulness of how he coached kids, his hierarchies, the values that he placed into his program. That is as legendary. And I think when you listened to people like the late, great Bill Walton, but even Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, and just the reverential respect they had for Wooden, to have that impact Corey. And what stood out with her remarks to me the most, Ben, was how she said that it validated her thought that she could care about the players and still be an effective coach. What are your thoughts? You live in LA, you're so familiar with John Wooden and all that he's about, but what are your thoughts on that?
Well, you go to Pauley Pavilion, it's incredible how many banners they've got up from the Wooden era, and
Absolutely.
Obviously it's been a distinguished program since then too. But I mean, if you really want to take it in, you go see the statues, you go see the championship banners, you go see the long list of retired jerseys that pretty much all belong to Hall of Fame players who went on to great success. That's what they talk about when they say legacy, right? Is, changing people's lives, making them better players, making them better humans, and then having them go on well after they've played for you, the huge success. And that's really what happened with the Wooden UCLA teams. Corey Close is going to have the same thing. I mean, a bunch of these players are going to go really high in the WNBA draft, including Lauren Betts, who could be the number one pick. We'll see exactly how that shakes out. But she has taken, it's hilarious. I mean, she quotes Wooden like some preachers quote the Bible or scripture. It's like every interview, it's John told me this, Coach Wooden said this, it's clear that this was way past the normal mentor-mentee relationship. That, it's just a very, very deep bond, and that she subscribes to all the same philosophies that he did. He was always about being a well-rounded person and being a good person. He talked a lot about humility. He talked a lot about balance. He didn't want people to rush, don't hurry. All those kinds of lessons are on and off the court from John Wooden. And I think Corey Close brought that to her team. You heard her mention, well, I have my players journaling, or I have my players doing positive affirmations after a practice about this is what went well. And you look at her best player, Lauren Betts, who described some very serious mental health battles and challenges along the way where, she wasn't happy at Stanford. She really felt like she lost her way. And so much of UCLA's success was Corey Close trying to find the right way to help Lauren Betts be happy as a person, be comfortable, be satisfied, and be able to, kind of achieve her best on the court. And so I do think the mental side was what really stood out. And, frankly, they got smacked last year. A lot of teams would break. A lot of coaches would question everything that they're doing and like go back to square one. And I think because she had that Wooden foundation, she didn't do it. She said, hey, let's go back and take another shot. We could do this thing. And they actually got it done. And in some cases, they weren't challenged all that much. They really took care of business in a lot of their toughest games this year.
They really did. Three quick thoughts. Number one, I love the way Lauren Betts ran the court. That is the sign of a happy post player. When you run the court both directions as hard as she did, the dead sprint, she would run rim to rim. That's every coach's dream. Every coach worth their weight in salt always talks about running the court, sprinting the court. Bigs, run the court, and if they do, if you've got the ball, reward them for their efforts. UCLA did that extremely well. Secondly, about going to Pauley Pavilion, I'm with you, but you also have to go into the Hall of Fame and see Johnny Wooden's office, humble office, the way they have recreated it, like created it from Wooden's own items, and then the historical, the trophies, etc. It's just, it really is another one of those religious experiences if you're really into the sport of basketball. But then the third thing I loved was, I remember back into the 90s when the Runnin' Rebs absolutely blasted Duke out of the water one year, and next year Duke came back and beat them. It really reminded me of that. And that was kind of the benchmark I was thinking going into the Final Four is what team was UCLA going to be? Were they going to be Duke, or were they going to be, as you described, as a lot of other teams that get broken or have their confidence shaken at their foundation? They certainly, Corey and her approach to the game built on that foundation, use that as a learning experience. And you see that so often. Until you get there, until you taste it, you don't know what the experience is. But not that many teams rebound that way and come back stronger the way UCLA did.
No, I mean, you're sparking thoughts for me on all those points. I mean, number one, we love bigs who run the court because think about how hard it is to defend Lauren Betts when you have your defense set in the half court. She's just so big. She's got the drop step moves. And now if you get her moving and you don't necessarily have the right matchup, now her defender has to run with her, and maybe she doesn't want to do that. It's much harder to run on defense than there is to run on offense, right? And your defense isn't set. Well, it's just going to be a layup. I mean, that's just, or in the NBA, it's going to be a dunk, right? And that's why you want the bigs to move so much. It's so hard to get those matchups in transition against big players. How many alley-oop dunks does Wemby get over the course of a season if he's moving up and down the court? I mean, it's just it's easy stuff, right? In terms of wood and shrines, the Indiana Basketball High School Hall of Fame, I would recommend that to people not too far outside of Indianapolis. That's where Coach Wooden was from. I actually went to his small hometown in the middle of nowhere. You wouldn't know it from anything else, right? Except they do have a lot of wooden signs up. But in Newcastle, they've got a lot of his memorabilia from his high school years. He was quite a player himself, and of course, he worked up the ranks as a coach in Indiana as well. So if you want the early John Wooden stuff, that's where you should go. I just think their resilience as a team was excellent. And part of their success, I would credit to them joining the Big Ten. Now, there's been a lot of tension in different sports about, these West Coast teams. Should they join the Big Ten? It's so much travel. It screws everything up. And, in football, maybe some of these teams aren't competitive, and it wasn't really the best idea. But by UCLA joining the Big Ten, they got test after test after test after test this year, and they smoked everybody. I mean, they really took care of business in the conference play. We know the Big Ten produced Caitlin Clark in Iowa. We know Michigan's got a great women's program that's been developing. I mean, you just go right down the list. Indiana, they've had some success recently. I mean, all these different teams are going to test you, and you're going to have to go on the road and beat them. And so I felt like by the time UCLA got to the tournament, they were so ready and so prepared. And I would just point out, it's rare that a Big Ten team wins it all. Iowa went 0 for 2, and that was a little sad to see. But the Big Ten took it in both men's basketball and women's basketball this year.
Well, for those of us who are Big Ten fans, it was a great year. It was fantastic to see. And let's jump over to the other Big Ten champion, the Michigan Wolverines. It means an awful lot to you and your family that this happened. One of the a couple of observations I have. I love that you made the point about UCLA feeding the post in the traditional way, the interior post pass. Like you said, that along with the mid-range jump shot, which is on a bit of a comeback trail, but those are lost art forms that I think are silly that they are. But I saw that a lot in the men's side of things because and it's a whole different discussion when you talk about possible rule changes down the road. But so many men's teams try to eat up the first 15 seconds of the shot clock with their dribble weave out front before they start going into any of their actions. And one of the actions that even as massive as Michigan is, that was still not exploited even to the ability that they could exploit it to, was the interior post passing. They did have some great high-low passes, some great back seals in the lane. It was more of what I would call a traditional post game, but it still surprises me. That's number one. The second surprise I had, because the final game was a bit of a rock fight. I mean, that was haymakers being thrown with blindfolds on.
Michigan couldn't hit a shot. And I mean, it was maybe their worst shooting game of the entire year in the championship game. I mean, that's the nightmare scenario, right?
It really was. And the other thing that threw me a bit from a technical side, Ben, is the spacing. I was shocked at how both teams, UConn too, because I've genuinely regarded as UConn being the gold standard of running effective actions away from the ball. Lots of screens, lots of picks, lots of slips. But I found both teams bunching up on one side, lower, like inside, close to her inside. I looked like in 1980s NBA basketball, close to her inside the 3-point line. That really surprised me. But do you think that that contributed? And I know I'm in the weeds on it, but I think that contributed to the low shooting percentages because they didn't space the court well to give a lot of shooters a bit of time to make the choice to catch and shoot or to lift fake and shoot because everybody was so clustered together.
Well, so Michigan's strategy this season was we're going to be bigger than you. We're going to bully you. So
Yes.
they bring in a whole bunch of guys who are upperclassmen, right, through the transfer portal. They get a Diamara, they get Merez Johnson, this kind of beefy power forward. A Diamara is 7'3" center. They get Yaxel Lendenberg,
Your
who is
UCLA
this.
guy, by the way.
Yeah, that's right. And Lendenberg comes in as sort of their best all-around player on both sides, but he's also really big. And they're kind of playing these jumbo lineups where they're playing him at the 3, where at times last year he played center. And so when you have that much size, and it's relatively good, versatile size too, it
Yes.
is going to create those clogged log jams that you're talking about. Now, when they went against Arizona in the Final Four, Arizona's whole thing was their winning strategy all year long was we're going to be bigger than you. We're going to score at the rim, and you're not going to be able to stop us.
We're going to beat you up. We're going to
Right.
beat you into submission inside.
But it went the other way in the Final Four,
Yeah.
right? Where it's like it
Yeah.
was bigs on bigs, and Michigan proved to be bigger, and that's how they were able to win that game. So when they go against UConn's not nearly as big as Arizona was. I think Michigan's strategy was, well, we feel very confident we're going to own the paint. And so what we're going to do is try to challenge every three-point shot that goes up as best we possibly can. We're not going to be double and tripling team guys in the post. We're going to be, trying to recover like crazy and challenge every shot, force those three-pointers out, and just try to make them more difficult shots. And that defensive game plan really worked. And you kept hearing on the broadcast, the guys were saying, well, UConn is playing the style of play that they want. The game is slower. Michigan prefers to play fast up and down. But the thing was, Michigan had a better defense all season. And so the fact that it turned into a rock fight, you might call that UConn style because the game was a little bit slower, but Michigan was very comfortable playing that way because they were such a complete team. They could beat Arizona playing big. They could beat UConn playing slow. And it didn't really matter because they were sort of the most well-rounded team that we really saw all season long, with the possible exception of Duke. Duke was also very well-rounded, but of course they tripped up blowing the lead against UConn, so we didn't get that big showdown. And so I think that's the sign of a very good team, also a very well-coached team. The other thing that stood out to me about the championship game, when nothing is going in, it's so easy to get discouraged. It's so easy to get down on yourself. You even saw the halftime interview where Yaxel Lendenberg is being asked about how he's playing. He's like, I'm horrible. I'm playing soft. I can't do anything.
One of the great interviews I've heard. One of the most honest, great interviews I've heard in a long time.
Right. And he was honest to a fault. You're saying, hey, man, pick your head up. Like, you guys are leading and, you're halfway home to a championship. Right. But that was the frustration level. I mean, he was injured, and I think that was contributing to maybe some of his struggles as well. But that's why I thought it was great coaching from Dusty May down the stretch. The UConn kid from Indiana, Mullins, hits 2 3-pointers. Immediately, Dusty May has the defensive, adjustment to put in a different player to guard him. Yaxel Lendenberg, throws up 2 jumpers because he starts to get tired midway through that second half. Immediately, Dusty May pulls him out and gives him a break. And even down the stretch, Duke had faltered against UConn with some of the inbounds and the turnovers, and they didn't take a timeout. Michigan started to have some of the same problems, and UConn banks in a 3-pointer to cut the lead to 4 late. Dusty uses the timeouts, gets his guys organized, makes sure they get to the free throw line. A guy actually misses both free throws. There's crazy scramble situations, and yet they're still poised enough, even despite all this mounting chaos, to be able to bring the win home at the end. McKinney hits the huge 3, which felt like the dagger, and then they were able to just get the stops that they needed and kind of squeeze out UConn's offense in the last minute or two. So I thought it was just a very well-managed game by Dusty. So many things going wrong, so many opportunities to lose your head. He never lost his head. He kept his composure, and his players followed along right behind him.
I'm talking with Ben Golliver here on the Deep Dive on Hoop City with Paul Sir. I love the fact that you mentioned that about Dusty, because in terms of what I consider to be the evolution of the game of basketball, a lot of times what's happening on the court is discussed, but what happens off the court in terms of preparation, the mental side of the game, and you talked about Corey Close and the way that she worked with Lauren Betts in a specific situation. But I also, to your point with Dusty May, the difference is it's not Bobby Knight. Not that coaches don't go Knight-like on players on occasion. They do.
Right.
But it's not the same game management approach that old school coaches, I think, used to have, which was the negative on the sideline. Like the focus is on the positive. The focus is on being in the moment, and the focus is on meeting the challenge in the moment, in controlling what you can control. And that's an easy statement to make. Well, just control what you can control.
Right.
What does that mean? That means you don't lose your head. You know, there's a great saying, when all those around you are losing, their minds, you can't lose yours. That's a horrible paraphrase, but
right.
it's the right idea. And I think that really has taken root in basketball in general, but in college basketball specifically, which keeps the players on a more positive pathway and trying to deal with what is happening in the game in the moment.
Well, the guy who Dusty May reminds me of, it's another Indiana high school basketball legend, it's Brad Stevens.
Very much so, yes.
I think the way that both those guys won is that they're the smartest guy in the room and they're the most prepared guy in the room. And they have an uncanny ability to put themselves in the players' minds to understand what motivates the players and what's going to make the players successful. So you mentioned Adai Amaro coming over from UCLA. Well, he has a coach like Mick Cronin screaming at him. He's the classic big who, you really do have to get on him to get up and down the court, to do all the extra work on defense. You got to keep him involved on offense. You got to worry about his foul trouble. I mean, it's just the classic guy who's a little bit too big for his own good, right? But clearly very skilled. Dusty May says, come over here. We're going to know exactly how to use you. We've put some other guys into the pros already who were big guys. You're going to be the back line guy on a massive team. You're going to fit in very well, and we're going to empower you. Well, he did all of those things, and Mara had a great season. Now he's rocketing up draft boards, possibly going to be in the lottery now because of how well things went. And he just completely dominated Arizona in that Final Four game, made himself a lot of money doing that, right? So Dusty May understood, hey, here's what UCLA is not giving this guy. Here's what I can give him at Michigan and go forward. The point on style of coaching in this modern era is very important. I think you can be a yeller like Hurley is, but Hurley also, there's a lot of love in the tough love with Hurley, where his players, he creates a lot of loyalty there because he always stands up for his guys and he puts them in position to be successful. I'm not sure the Mick Cronin style where you're just yelling to yell most of the time. I don't know if that's going to work because, number one, guys can transfer, and number two, guys are making money, right? And so it's like, all right, man, like if you want to yell at me, fine, the check is still going to cash, right? And I could just leave once the season's over. And that's sort of what happened with Mara, right? So I think you have to really treat these guys like pros and treat them like adults because that's the new way things go in this modern basketball. And the mental health side is super important too. Guys will just leave if they're not happy. It's so easy. I mean, how many guys transferred this season? I heard there was like 1,500 people in the portal already after one day across the country. And so you have to build a positive culture. You have to lead with empowering your players. You have to be able to communicate with them about roles and sacrifice, which Dusty did. I mean, nobody on the team averaged more than 16 points a game. They won the national championship. They had the best offense in the country. That's crazy, and there's a lot of NBA players on that roster who sacrificed for each other. So to me, Dusty May is becoming the model for the modern college basketball coach. You have to be good with the X's and O's. You have to be good with assessing talent. You have to know how talent can fit together. So you have to think like a front office executive a little bit. And that's why he reminds me of Brad Stevens, because what did Brad Stevens do after he was done coaching? He immediately became the president and the architect of an NBA championship team in Boston, right? So it's high praise for Dusty May, but I think he's deserved it based on his success this season.
He really has. And what I think is interesting about what your commentary just spoke to, especially about Mara. And I remember we were in Southern California when Mara was a freshman and watching the Bruins play and watching how Cronin dealt with Mara. It was embarrassing. Because you want to defeat a big guy, just get him out there, a big skinny freshman from a foreign country, and scream at him the whole time and yank him. And scream at him as he's walking down the bench. Now he's going to be a lottery pick. So I think we know which system works best. And I think we're onto something here. And I think also the way that Close coached, obviously, like we've talked about already with Betts, is these are examples, and I think in particular in the point of May, he is the prototype now because with all those people piling into the portal now, I mean, I cannot even imagine, Ben, what it's like to be a recruiter for college programs now, because you're looking for new talent out in the hinterlands, but then you've got to be prepared for when the portal opens up and all this other talent becomes available, and everybody's needs are being assessed, and what you can offer at various stages of a player's development, as a mid-major, as a low major, as a high major. My God, it is just added. I mean, we're really dealing with, three-dimensional chess here. We really are trying to get this together. And now the worst thing is it worked for Michigan. And we all know everybody's on that bandwagon now to have 5 transfers next year into your program.
No question. I mean, it's a copycat deal. If transfers is the way that you're getting talent, then everybody's going to want to chase the transfers, right? I did, on that point, there was the old stories about Nick Saban where he would start recruiting the day after winning the national championship. He would just wake up like it was a normal day and get back to work. I actually saw some videos of Michigan assistants. I think they were on like spreadsheet transfer portal websites within hours after winning the national championship, because the portal like opened at midnight. And so they already had to get to work on their wish list of contacts and all that kind of stuff. They couldn't even enjoy the celebration practically. I think Dusty May said he got an hour and a half of sleep that night because he had to wake up and do the television circuit as well. So what a lifestyle these guys have signed up for, but clearly they've mastered it, and again, it goes back to organization, creating a positive coaching culture. Hey, that's a lot of work for the assistants to have to do. Most guys would say, hey, let's just go out and enjoy the night. This is going to be a once in a lifetime thing. If you've got the discipline to just dive back in and you're already thinking about next year. And Dusty's whole message was, we want to be back in Detroit a year from now in the next Final Four. That's elite discipline. That's elite leadership. And that rubs off on everybody. It keeps some of the players coming back too. They've already got some players who have recommitted for next season. I'm sure they're going to try to convince all those guys, hey, don't go to the NBA yet. Come back for one more year. Let's go back to back. And then maybe you'll be a top 5 pick. I'm sure he's going to be working on the guys like that as well. And, because you have deep pockets at some of these schools, you're able to make some pretty compelling arguments for people. So that's really where it can get out of control, though, is if everybody wants the transfers and all these schools are saying, we've got alumni who want to spend money. What I'm interested in, I wish we had the salary numbers for some of these guys with the NIL, because I wouldn't be surprised if you get into some pretty crazy bidding wars here as these years go forward.
And that's going to be really interesting too, because I was listening to some commentary on the financial impact of this new NIL environment and the transfer portal environment. And I think the school was Rutgers, but I think they've lost like almost $500 million since they joined the Big Ten.
Oh my gosh.
Because they just can't compete.
Yeah.
They're trying to compete, but they're not able to compete at the football or the basketball levels. So they're paying for players. And last year they had 2 lottery picks, for God's sakes, in their lineup, but it didn't reflect in their record, nor did it reflect in their recruiting class. So I think we've got, this is going to be such an interesting upcoming 2 to 3 years, I think, as this all shakes out. We've talked before, does the NCAA try to start putting in some guardrails here? If they do, are they going to stand up in court? Because the first thing everybody does as soon as the NCAA puts a rule in is take them to court. And it's going to get more complicated, I think, before it gets simpler. But it was a great tournament, I thought, in so many respects. And it was both were, I thought, satisfying victories, even though the UCLA was a blowout. I loved seeing UCLA work South Carolina over, to be honest. That's just my own personal bias. It was, and I was happy for Michigan too. I was happy for the Big Ten. I was happy for Michigan. And so, the transfer portal is going to be fascinating. Let's jump over to the NBA, Ben, because we've got the last weekend of games. There's still some positioning that's remaining to be worked out. And it's particularly, I think, in the Eastern Conference, where the most movement could still happen in the last couple of games. But before we jump into that, we usually touch on the Lakers, and we've gone from, talk about peaks and valleys and soaring high and falling far, but they definitely have fallen far thanks to the injury bug. Again, when things were really cooking for them, when they were really going great, playing at the best they were. Luka was playing probably as well as he's ever played in his career. Then the same night, he and Reeves go out. And now they're looking at the playoffs with a whole different lens, and it ain't a pretty sight.
Well, I mean, it's tough to see, and I know that everybody got their hopes up, and the chemistry around this team, to me, was the best we've seen from a Lakers team in 5 years. I mean, they had pretty good chemistry the year after they won the bubble championship. They came back, and they were quite good, and guys were all on the same page, and they were rolling. But since then, there's been a lot of ups and downs and drama, and Russell Westbrook's here, and now he's gone, and D'Angelo Russell, and like all the just kind of seasons that got away from the team for basketball reasons, for personality reasons, for the kinds of stuff that you would hope that, you would be able to control, and they just haven't really been able to take care of it. This year, they finally did. Everybody's aligned. LeBron's buying into the third role. Austin Reeves has taken a jump. Luka's playing like an MVP candidate. It's all lined up. JJ's, got another 50-win season under his belt. And then kapoof, it all just goes away overnight. And, of course, it's because Luka got injured and also secondarily because Reeves got injured. Horrible breaks for them. And so they were on track potentially to be the 3 seed in the Western Conference. And that, puts them in position, well, maybe they could get to the Western Conference Finals before they have to face Oklahoma City. Now they can't even look ahead at all. Now they're looking at the possibility of a 4-5 matchup against Houston. Houston, I think it would be heavily favored in that matchup over the Lakers without their 2 stars. There's just no good way to replace 60 to 65 to 70 points per game between Luka and Reeves. You just can't do it. And so now they're looking at the possibility of a very quick first-round exit and potentially starting that series on the road where you're coming back home down 2-0, and that's a really tough spot to be in if that's how it shakes out. So, I mean, yeah, they went from dreaming of the Western Conference Finals and maybe if everything breaks right, Luka can outduel the Thunder, like that's the dream, right? To now their season could be over in about 2 weeks. And, you have all the questions. Do you bring LeBron back? How do you, refashion the roster? How much is Reeves going to make as a free agent this summer? I mean, you start asking all these kinds of questions, and they never even got the fun of a real playoff run. So it's just very demoralizing here in Los Angeles. There's no other way to put it. And you can even feel it at the game earlier this week. I mean, they played the Thunder. LeBron sat out. The 2 stars were injured. They were down 40 at one point, and they're starting Drew Timme, Gonzaga legend, somehow getting himself into the starting lineup. And it just didn't feel real. I mean, it felt like Summer League kind of. It just didn't even feel like a real game. And just a week or two before that, they had been running the Cavaliers off the court, and everything was going great. So it turned so fast, and I feel bad for everybody involved.
I do too. And it has been the source of a lot of controversy. It being the Lakers have been the source of a lot of controversy. But questions were being not only answered, expectations were being met and exceeded as we were getting on into the season. LeBron, after he came back from sitting out for a while, blended in as well as I think anybody could have ever expected him. Luka was unreal. Austin was rock solid. Ayton, people were even saying, Ayton's not so bad. Like he's doing some good things. Like when was the last time you heard that about by Ayton? So yeah, it is a shame. But now we have to look at the landscape. The Thunder are phenomenal, just playing phenomenal basketball, as are the Spurs, as are the Nuggets. My gosh, those top 3 in the West, the way they're going into the playoffs, that sets up just an amazing Western Conference battle with the Thunder being favored, and I would probably go so far as to say somewhat heavily favored to come out of it and to repeat as champions. But now you've got Jokic just playing unbelievably well, and the Spurs have not taken their foot off the gas. They just get better and better as a team, as does Wemby. And now for the first time we have the Wemby factor in the playoffs, barring injury, in full bloom. That changes a lot of things and creates the possibility where people can now start saying, maybe it'll be a little more interesting than just the Thunder rolling through.
Well, yeah, I definitely think that the Spurs are the must-watch team of these playoffs. I can't wait to see how Wemby plays, how they perform. But I would say the Thunder are huge beneficiaries of the Lakers' woes because They
Yes.
were looking at the possibility if the Lakers were the 3 seed, Denver probably would have been the 4 seed, and now Oklahoma City would have to face Denver in the second round if that's how it had shaken out. Instead, what's most likely going to happen is the Lakers are going to drop into that 4-5 matchup with Houston. Oklahoma City will have a cakewalk in the first round. They'll probably get Houston in the second round. Houston just is not a good team in the clutch, and they're not a
No.
particularly good matchup for Oklahoma City. I would expect Oklahoma City to take care of Houston quite easily in the second round. So instead of having to get Denver in that second round, now they're getting Houston. So you'd way rather have that if you're the Thunder. And then you put on top of it, if the good teams all advance, so I'm saying if San Antonio and Denver take care of business, they'll have to play in the second round, and that's going to be an absolute bloodbath, a war. And
God.
meanwhile, Oklahoma City's sitting over here saying, okay, well, we get to take care of Houston while these two guys beat each other up, and we only have to face one of them, right? Well, if you're Oklahoma City, and you're getting not buys, but you're getting 2, pretty quick rounds, and you're getting to rest up and concentrate all your resources on who are you going to play in the Western Conference Finals. It's a huge advantage. And so I'm not saying it's impossible for Denver or San Antonio to make it through to the finals, but it's going to be a lot tougher. Their path is a lot trickier than it will be for Oklahoma City. But Denver's been playing great basketball. I think 10 straight wins. I mean, they've really turned it on when they've needed to. And one of those wins was a big overtime victory over the Spurs in one of the best games we've seen all season.
Absolutely.
But the Spurs are holding down their end of the bargain, too. They're going to have the 2 seed. They're going to have home court advantage. They've got great chemistry and momentum as well. So, it feels like a collision course between Denver and San Antonio, and then another one between whoever wins that series and Oklahoma City. But the untimely injuries for the Lakers, to me, it just shook up the whole deck, and it really cleared a path for Oklahoma City to potentially repeat. I did get a chance to see them this week. Holy cow. I mean, it was probably a B or C effort by their standards because they really weren't pushed. They didn't have to play Jalen Williams. The Lakers were kind of in tatters like I described, but boy, the defense is still clicking at a high level. Shea looked unstoppable. Wasn't even his best game, but still just so relentless in terms of how he scores. He makes it look so easy. Chet Holmgren's been coming on lately, playing some really good basketball as well, which is a positive sign. I feel better than ever, honestly, that OKC is going to be able to go back to back. And it's so hard to do that in this modern NBA, but I think it's setting up quite well for them.
I think it is too. And what I love about it, though, is the only thing standing in their way are these 2 X factors named Wemby and Jokic. Yeah. And San Antonio, of course, had their early season success. You can't really transfer that forward to now. Because we know it's a marathon, not a sprint, and lots has changed. But the one thing San Antonio does do, and definitely better than Denver, but better than anybody else in the NBA, is they do match up better against OKC than anybody else. They have some unique matchups that can bother, not stop, but can bother them. There's nobody that can stop SGA right now. Like you can have as good as San Antonio is. He's just on a whole different level than everybody. And he's got too many weapons in the quiver to be stopped. It would seem, but it does make at least there's some possibility of a drama in the Western Conference, and it's not just going to be. It still could be, but it's not just going to be a steamroller job by OKC. So Ben, on the East. We'll wrap up with that. You've got Detroit. I didn't look today before we talked. What's the latest on Cade Cunningham's health?
Well, so he came back, kind of surprising some people. He played limited minutes, but he did play this week, and he was really looking to move the ball around. I think he had 10 assists in like 25 minutes, and so it wasn't, I'm trying to come back and score 35 and get everybody excited. So he's back. Obviously, I think there's a boost from a basketball standpoint, but also just from a mental standpoint, right?
Absolutely.
Because you're going into the playoffs feeling like, hey, we are the 1 seed. You got that swagger if you're the Pistons. And, I expect whoever they play, and we don't know who it's going to be. We'll come down to the final day of the season, but whoever they play is going to try to test Cade. That would be my number one game plan thing is, hey, this guy's collapsed lung, whatever they're calling it, you got to rough him up, and you're not going to cross the line, of course, but you got to test him physically to see what is he capable of doing. And so whoever they play,
how awful that sounds to say The guy has a collapsed lung. We got to rough him up.
Hey,
I'm just joking. I'm
yeah.
just joking. It's not like he's got a bum knee. It's like he had a collapsed lung.
No. I mean, it's a heroic for him to get back on the court. And, we've seen sometimes with these, it is an injury that maybe sometimes sounds worse than it is. I think you can wear a protective thing on your chest.
Yes.
We saw CJ McCollum come back from it in a couple of weeks. But, this is the NBA playoffs. We know how coaches are. You're going to be getting picked. I'm running through him through 15 different screens, right? You're going to try
Absolutely.
to punish him a little bit. And so he's a tough guy. I mean, clearly he's back on the court. And he's so talented. And so it's great to see this number one seed kind of closer to full strength, going into the playoffs. And now it raises the question, okay, well, a lot of people have been saying Boston's the favorite, because they've got Tatum back and, they've got the experience. They've got a lot of guys, if Derek White or Jaylen Brown, two-way players who have done it at a very, very high level. But this year's body of work says Detroit's been better, right? So who's the real favorite, and New York wants to be into the party too. So you were saying earlier, you've got a couple of interesting foils for the number one seed in the Western Conference. I think we have the exact same dynamic shaping up in the East, right?
Agreed. Totally agree. And I think that this is one of the more intriguing playoff beginnings in the Eastern Conference in a long, long time. How long has it been since all 10 Eastern Conference teams will have records over 500?
Right.
It used to be you get like to 6 and the rest were all below 500. Now everybody's over 500, and in the West, the bottom 2 are going to be below 5. Well, yeah, I think the bottom 2 are Golden State. Yeah, they're below 500. So it's great to see the Eastern Conference strengthening up. So I've got, and I know your time, you've been so generous with it, but I've got to run a couple of questions by you. If you had to pick today between Coach of the Year, I'll just give you 2 candidates, Bickerstaff and Missoula, who would you pick?
I'm on Missoula, and it's mostly because the health factor. I just think with Detroit, until the Cade injury late in the season, they had such great availability. They just got into one of those joyride years where everything was easy. I don't think everything was easy for Boston. I mean, when you're trying to pick up the pieces after Tatum, but not just Tatum being injured, losing Horford, losing Kornet, you go right down the list. They had a lot of key rotation players departing. And so they had to reshape their identity on the fly. They became younger. They became deeper. They became, I think, a tougher team, a little bit more of a, maybe tougher is the wrong word because they're not as big, but just a gutsier team. They just playing hard, trying to run you off the court, trying to exhaust you a little bit, a little bit more like the Pacers who won the East last year. Right. They just sort of changed their identity, and it worked, and I think a lot of it is how Missoula wants to play. Great relationship with Jaylen Brown, was able to kind of empower him. Derek White just rock solid. He steps up. Peyton Pritchard's getting some starting looks at times this season. He has a great season. It just felt like he really maximized what his team was able to do while juggling a lot of strife. The things that were outside of his control, players departing, Tatum being injured, Tatum needing to be worked back in mid-season. I think they've handled it very well. So even though Detroit has been a great overachieving team, not taking anything away from them at all, Boston actually surprised me more with their success this season. I thought they were going to be a team, down there in the play-in, not 9 or 10, not fighting for the number one seed and landing at number 2. I just didn't see that coming. So, that's why I went with Missoula, but it's an all-time, close battle for sure.
I couldn't agree with you more. I think you summed it up. I mean, when you're dealing with splitting hairs to get to that conclusion, that means you have some great coaching going on, because you can go beyond those 2 as well and look at a number of other coaches that have done an absolutely phenomenal job. Okay, real quickly, awards, most improved player.
So I'm going Jalen Duren with the Detroit Pistons. I think what put me over the top was when Cade went out, he raised his game and they kept winning, right? Yep. I usually think of a player like Jalen Duren as being derivative because so much of his offense is being created for him. But the fact that he's a great, backline defender for them, great rim protector, shown some, growth offensively in terms of, being a willing passer and also being able to score even without Cade setting him up. And also just to break out in terms of making his first All-Star game and being a player who's going to be someone who, I mean, he didn't even get a contract extension last summer. Detroit, they were even, I think, surprised by his level of improvement this year. Otherwise, they would have paid him last year when it was cheaper, because now the price just went up. So
They did.
to me, I love rewarding winning. I love rewarding guys who contribute directly to winning. And that's Jalen Duren. I mean, you got some good candidates, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Jalen Johnson for Atlanta. It's just tougher to be the 1 seed than it is to be the 5 or 6 seed. And so that's why I'm going Jalen Duren.
I think it's a great choice. It's a solid choice. I would love I'm a big Alexander Walker fan. I think the Timberwolves made a huge mistake not paying him because a lot of the problems that they've had would have been solved if they kept him. And if Finch had done a more insightful job of how to play him. I think, players get pigeonholed no matter how good you are as a coach. Players, when you're coaching, you start pigeonholing players and saying, this is what they're capable of. And you put them in that box. And I really felt Nickeil had that problem in Minnesota, where he went to Atlanta and out of necessity or out of design, they let him go. And boy, has he ever exploded in terms of his improvement this year, and made a big difference on the improving Hawks as well, who have some talent and are trying to do some good things down there. Defensive player of the year. Gee, this is a tough one, isn't it?
Yeah, no, you know who it's going to be. It's Wemby.
Yeah, of course.
He's got the statistical argument. He's ranked like first in all the major advanced stats for defense, but this is really just the eye test, right? I mean, when you start to see players running away from a guy, because they're like they're afraid of his arms. They
look oftentimes in the NBA for the first time in a long time. They look like junior high players when they see the big guy, and all of a sudden there's a 6'5" grade 8 kid, 8th grader out there who's blocking everybody's shots. That's how NBA players react to him.
Yeah, I mean, U-turns are legal in the NBA. You're allowed to just, go towards the rim and then just, do a 180 and go back the other way. We see it a lot. And, it shows through. I mean, their defense was 25th last year because he missed a lot of time due to injury. They're all the way up to 3rd this year. He's leading the league in block shots. His numbers, they really haven't been done by anybody except for Shaq and David Robinson over the last 30 years. He's just in a class by himself. You don't have to overthink this one. No. Asar Thompson, great for Detroit. Chet Holmgren, great for Oklahoma City. But, there's one guy, and if he's healthy, he'll win the next 5, right? I mean, at least. 100%. Yeah.
He's just a different deal. Okay, last two. I'm going to start with I'm going to leave the hardest one for last. MVP. What's
Shai Gilgeous-Alexander? And,
100%.
For me, I hopped on with him when they were 24-1 to start. And I felt like, anytime you don't have a championship hangover and you're like coming back better, that shows a lot to me about the character and the consistency of your leader. And he carried them through so many injuries, right? I think last year they set the NBA record for point differential. They were winning their games by an average of 12.8 points. This year, it's only 12.1 points, which is top 5 all time. So again, it just shows you the consistency. He breaks Wilt Chamberlain's record for the 20 points per game. They have the best record in the league again, the number 1 seed again. I don't know why I would have changed my mind since the 24-1. I know people made arguments for Wemby, arguments for Joker, arguments for even Luka there for a while, but ultimately he came up short on the games played. It just best player on best team with the consistency factor. He's mastered scoring. He's shooting 2-pointers more efficiently than prime Shaquille O'Neal or prime Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. I mean, Jabbar never missed his jump hook, and somehow Shai has better 2-point field goal percentage. Makes no sense.
Numbers, ludicrous.
Yeah.
Like these are, and what I love about the MVP, it's not a race, but it's a bar being raised to a higher level than I've ever seen in terms of 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 5. Those players are all really good, and in many, many years would all have been MVPs in their own right. Yeah. But they're really good. It's just this guy is better and better in so many ways, and has improved already sterling game and turned it into something even more special through his grounded hard work in the offseason. So you're bang on. So here's the tough one, Rookie of the Year.
Toughest one, no question about it. Ultimately, I went Cooper over Khan. I changed my mind here down the stretch because I really started to think about. I didn't want this to be about who had the best situation, right? Obviously, Charlotte turned out to be a better situation than Dallas, which is not what anybody expected coming into the year. Charlotte was supposed to be the young, dysfunctional team, right? Dallas was
Yes.
supposed to be the veteran, strong team. But those things are really outside the control of Cooper and Khan. All they can do is play, right? And so let's judge the players. And what we ended up seeing was Cooper was a very effective, a very good number one option. And Khan was an elite, an ideal number three option for Charlotte. And in the NBA, it is just so much harder. It's such a bigger burden to be the number one guy than it is to be the number three guy. And so Cooper's got the better individual numbers. Khan has the more efficient numbers, of course, because he's thriving on a team that's winning. Khan was a little bit healthier, which is a nice gold star as well. But if I'm trying to imagine swapping those guys, reversing their situation. So you put Khan in Dallas, you put Cooper in Charlotte. If Cooper gets to play with a point guard like LaMelo, who's setting everything up and running this beautiful offense, and he gets a pretty good wing with Brandon Miller to take away some of the defensive attention, I think Cooper would have gone absolutely nuts, even more so than he did this season, and Charlotte would have won even more games than they did. I think if you put Khan in Dallas as the number one guy, no Anthony Davis because he gets traded and he's injured, no Kyrie Irving, I think Dallas struggles even more than they did because it's just asking a lot of any young player to fulfill that role. I'm not sure that Cooper got enough credit for how well he did as a number one player this year because Dallas's record was so bad. And I just felt like, look, he's the better talent. He is the better individual player. I think Dallas would say no immediately if the idea of trading Cooper for Khan was raised. I think Charlotte would quietly say yes, we will trade Khan for Cooper if that was ever on the table. And so that's how
What a great thought.
yeah, well, that's how I broke a very close race. But, I think you were mentioning just a minute ago, four guys who are MVP candidates this year could have won MVP in a lot of years, no question. I think you look at Khan, he had a better rookie year than probably 8 of the last 10 rookie of the years. Guys
Absolutely.
like Paolo, LaMelo, John Morant. I mean, he's better than all those guys. Maybe you could say Wemby and Luka would still win rookie of the year over Khan. I mean, those are pretty good players, right? So it's no knock on Khan, but I have Cooper in a very, very, photo finish. I've got Cooper over Khan.
Great assessment. And I do agree with you because when I look at Khan and I think of him as the number one option on a bad team, he might still score the same amount of points that he's scoring, but it would be a lot less efficiently because the shots, the looks he got in that offense were very, very good, are very, very good in Charlotte. But man, to give the kid kudos, to your point, to lead the league as a rookie and by a bunch in 3-pointers made, but here's what I love about Khan. To me, Khan, let's see if I can formulate the thought real quickly for you. The article about him playing the kind of the rat ball tournament, rat ball league with his dad, having experience with that, we call it noon ball in Minneapolis, St. Paul, where we had the same sort of thing, where a bunch of old guys are together with a bunch of young guys, and no prisoners taken. And but the way he plays actually is the way that more American players should play, and most American players don't play, because he moves so well without the ball, moves and relocates when the ball isn't on his side. And it's surprising how many American shooters don't do that. They're corner or wing stationary shooters. Khan is a moving shooter. And that's a real tribute to his basketball background in learning how to play at that level, which you think would be standard fare in the NBA, but it really isn't. So anyway, I think to me, if Khan gets the nod, you can understand it. If there was ever a case, probably since the last time you had co-rookies of the year, you could make that case in this situation. But anyway, Ben, this has been awesome. Thank you for your time. And what a great discussion. And it's going to be an interesting final weekend of the NBA and where the matchups are. And I look forward to having the opportunity to talk again with you real soon.
Oh, absolutely. And the one good thing we know, if we have a lot of tight awards races, that means we're probably going to have a pretty good playoffs too, right? Because you got a lot of guys playing great basketball who are, trying to leave a mark on the upcoming postseason. So I can't wait.
I can't wait either. And just one other ditty is, as we mentioned about the MVP race, not that it's close between Khan and Cooper for the Rookie of the Year, but there's a lot of years where the next 5 rookies under them would have been serious contenders for Rookie of the Year, because there's some really good rookies this year and so much talent in the next draft.
Yeah, it's great. I mean, VJ is probably going to be my third pick on that ballot, and I'm glad they only make you fill out 3 because otherwise, it starts to get real hard after that as well, like you said. So it's a lot of depth of young talent, and it's an NBA right now where if you're young and you're good, you can come in and make an impact. I think because of the offensive nature of the game, pace and space, young legs being a huge advantage, you don't have to pay your dues for 3 or 4 years anymore. You can come in and try to be an all-star year one,
Absolutely. We're seeing it firsthand in real time. So Ben Golliver, thank you so much. Can't wait to read your next Substack post. Share with everybody how you can read you on Substack again.
Yeah, bengolliver.substack.com, nice and easy. And I got a podcast, greatestofalltalk.com as well. People want to listen there.
And listen to that because, man, you guys do a phenomenal job on that. Ben, thanks so much.
All right, thanks. Take care, sir.